Today is a wonderful day because my dear friend Liz is releasing her first pattern. This is the Chartreuse Crossbody and it has amazing features and is such a fun sew. Some of the things that I like about this is how it's such a cute bag, but it comes together so quickly and has very few pieces to cut. So you can honestly cut and sew this easily in just a few hours. Another thing I love is this feature focus right here. It allows you to use your favorite fabrics or more expensive fabrics in a small quantity but still has a big impact on the finished bag. This is a fun sew and I love that it is an economical sew because we can use those feature prints, those more expensive custom fabrics we love to buy without breaking the bank or making a very expensive bag. As someone who sells at craft shows, this allows me to keep my prices fair to the customers while still giving them beautiful bags. On the front, we have a slip pocket. On the back, we have a zipper pocket. We have a recessed zipper and another pocket inside the bag. Also in this video, I'm going to show you how to install grommets. Lots of times I don't show the installation of grommets because it's just a little bit easier for me to do it off camera, but several people have mentioned that they don't understand how to install them, and I want to show you exactly how easy it is to add these grommets here. Of course you could use D-rings instead, but the grommets are so much quicker and so easy and add a unique look to any bag. So definitely consider watching this. It'll be the last thing we do because we don't install them till the end of the bag. Now let's go ahead and talk about the pieces we're going to need to create the Chartreuse Crossbody bag from Sew That Liz. I am using cotton woven prints to create my bag today. On the back of these, I have a medium weight interfacing. I always use interfacing from Royal Pixie, so for this bag, since I'm using a cotton woven, for the materials, I'm using their Royal Pixie Light on everything. My fabric is from Jane R. Edwards. As always, I will have the link for everything I'm using, including the pattern, in the description. So this is going to be our main feature panel. That's the part that is right here in the middle of the bag that is kind of the focus. Look at what a small amount you actually need to have that impact in the bag. This is going to be the front, this is going to be the back, and that's all. If you want to use that custom print, that's all you would have to use, such a small amount. I'm going to have 3 pocket lining pieces. For these, I do want to make mention that on the front of your bag, that pocket lining will peek through. For me, mine's going to be the same as my focus print. You can choose whatever you want if you want to have a pop of color or a little bit of contrast there. 2 of these linings will be for our exterior pockets. 1 will be for the interior pocket. Then we come to our lining. I'm going to have 2 lining pieces, again using that same print. And I do have them interfaced as well since they are just a cotton woven. I'm going to have vinyl for this bag, the zipper panels out of vinyl, so I have 2 zipper panels. I have 1 top band, and I have the base. This is going to be the bottom of the bag. For my zipper panel and my base, I'm not interfacing them with anything. But for this top band, I am going to add a layer of Decaville Heavy. Do not center your Decaville Heavy on this top band. The pattern tells you exactly the measurements as to where you put it, so you can kind of draw like a little box to set it in. I want to cut back in this clip and let you know that while I was talking about how you do not need anything to interface on the base, just remind you, if you've looked at the pattern, you already know this, but you will need a piece of foam, but we don't attach this foam until after we do a couple more steps. So I will tell you and show you when we're attaching the foam, but I just didn't want to forget to let you know that you will need foam, and we will add that later on. The other thing I'll need is, of course, I'll need my fabric to make a strap. And I will need 3 zippers, 2 exterior, 1 lining. I will need a zipper tab for the exterior zipper. I'm going to need 3 zipper pulls. I'm using all mushrooms because I love mushrooms and I think that's going to look great. For my handle, I will need 2 swivel hooks. I'm doing a 1-inch strap, so my swivel hooks are 1 inch, and my adjuster bar is 1 inch as well. That's all we need. So quick, so easy. It will take you no time to cut it, interface it, and get it ready to go. Now that we've talked about all the pieces, what we're going to do now is work on the prep work. First thing the pattern tells us is to mark the centers of everything. That's always a good habit when we're doing stuff, but definitely there are certain parts of this that we really need those center marks. For my lining pieces, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with them first. You're going to mark your centers, but also on the back of 2 of them, this is going to be for the 2 exterior pockets. These 2 pieces right here. We are going to use the tracing template that's given to us in this pattern. You're going to cut that template out of the paper. You're not going to cut it out of the fabric at all. What you're going to do though is once you get it cut, you are going to center it here at the top and you are going to trace that stitch line. We're going to do that on 2 of these pieces. Since I just traced it there. On the 3rd piece, this is going to go on the inside of the bag. Here is my print. I have it orientated this way. I will take those 2 short ends. I'm going to fold them right sides together. The pattern is then going to give us a series of measurements. Here is my crease. I'm going to come down and measure and draw my line here first. After I draw that line, the pattern will tell me to go down a certain amount and draw my second line. Then it will tell me to come in from the sides and draw lines there. This is your zipper box that you are going to use to sew on the interior piece to make our little zipper pocket. But just do your measurements from your folded edge here at the top on this side down here. So when we open it up, our box is closer to the bottom of our lining instead of the top. For our 2 main feature panels, the only thing I'm going to do on these is I'm just going to mark the centers on them. For my lining pieces, I'm going to go ahead and use the pattern measurements to cut out the 2 square boxes to box our corners at the end of this. I'm also going to I'll set this piece aside. I don't need to do anything to this one right now, but for one of the pieces, I need to draw a line. The pattern tells us how far up from the bottom. We draw that line, and I'm going to go ahead and take the lining that I drew the box on and center it on that lining panel piece. That way I can go ahead whenever I'm ready to start sewing, I can just sew around that box right away. Let's go ahead and put a few clips. I will check my measures to make sure I'm centered in just a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and place my clips right there so that part is taken care of. The next thing I'll do is I'll pull out one of my panel pieces and one of the lining panels that I've already traced on that template, and I'm going to match up the centers on this. Matching up those top raw edges. Put a few clips here. And then whenever I'm ready to start sewing, all I'll do is sew directly on that line. This is going to be my front. I'm going to do the same thing for my back piece. Match up the centers of the lining and the main feature panel here at the top. Add a few clips, and this one is ready to sew as well. First thing I'm doing when I'm sewing on the sewing machine is I'm going to sew the lining pocket pieces to that main feature panel piece for our back and our front. So that's the 2 things I will sew first. I'm going to go ahead and take care of the zipper pocket for the lining as well. Since I have everything drawn on, it's pretty easy sewing. I don't even have to worry about a seam allowance. I'm just sewing directly on all the lines that I've already made. When you're sewing this front part, if you're having trouble with that curve, you can shorten your stitch length. I'm going to go ahead and turn mine down just so I can make sure I can get that curve properly. And also when we shorten our stitch length when going around curves, that makes it look a little bit better at the end, because if we have a wider stitch length and we turn something, you may see the gaps, but if it's shorter, we won't see those gaps and get a smoother edge there. I will backstitch at the beginning and the end of all of these stitches. So now that I've got these things sewn up, what I'm going to do is do some cutting. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a straight line in the middle of this box, but I'm not going to go from edge to edge of the box. When I get about 1/2 inch away, I'm going to veer to the 2 corners on each side, making an inverted V. I will then be able to push this lining through. I'll have to take it over to my ironing board and press everything really nice and flat so I have a really good opening for the zipper. For these 2 pieces, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim down the seam allowance to about 1/4 inch. But here in the corner, I'm just going to make a cut close, and I will show you, you'll see me do it, but I'm just going to make a cut into that curve, but not cutting the stitches. I want to leave the stitches intact. But that will just help me when I flip this over to have a little bit more of an ability to spread so I get a cleaner curve right there. So let's do those 2 things on these panels to get them ready for the next steps. So I got the first one trimmed 1/4 inch, and I'm just going to come back in and I'm just going to make a small snip there. You could cut out a V if you wanted to, but for me, I find this works just fine. You can see I'm getting close to the stitches, but I'm not cutting through them. I'm going to repeat that on the other panel as well, and then I'll cut out my zipper box. So now that I have this cut, let's go ahead and push the pocket lining through. I come over to the back side, and I always like to kind of push these, just finger press these seams open. After I finger press those seams open, then I just come to where you can see those stitches are, and I open them really good and kind of separate them really nice, and then I put some clips on here. This is before I even iron. I just like to go ahead and get that kind of open, because once we go over to the iron, things can shift easily. So when I'm already having these clips in here, I'm already kind of taking the time to teach the fabric the way I want it to lay. So when I go over to the iron, I can get an accurate press on those seams the way I want them to be. We can see that zipper box is already looking great. Now we have these pieces here. We are going to flip them over. So we're going to take that lining and flip it all the way over. And you're going to be like, oh wait, what's it doing? We just start right here in the corner and we peel those 2 apart. And I'm going to start pushing them together. So you can see that little piece of your lining there. I'm going to make sure that it gets completely flush with the top of that exterior piece, and I'll put a clip there. The rest of it then, once you do that part, will just fall into place. Again, you're going to take the time to find the middle of those seams and to kind of expose them a little bit so you can teach the fabric the way you want it to lay. So whenever you do the next steps, it's a really clean, smooth looking seam. I'm going to go over to this other side and do the same thing. I'm going to push that back and get that lining to match up directly with the top of that exterior piece, and that'll be my first clip. When I get that, everything else will kind of want to go ahead and follow suit. Clip right there in that curve. You can see the curve looks really good and smooth. Go into the middle, do the same thing. If you haven't already decided, and I already have decided, which is going to be your front and which is going to be your back, you'll have to do that now. I already know that this is going to be my back panel. So I'm not going to top stitch this panel. I'm going to set it aside, and I'll probably take this over to the iron too, since I'm already going to be at the iron for the other part. I'll probably go ahead and press those seams flat to get a really crisp edge on these. This one is going to be my front. I know because I planned it. I wanted this centered. You can see how that's not rolling. I just don't have it pressed open enough. If it It would be fine like that, but I really want a nice press, so I'm going to push my finger in there and kind of get it really nice and smooth so no bulk is gathering there and it's a nice flat seam. If you're having trouble with that, go from underneath and kind of pull it apart to push it up so that it just looks beautiful. So I've got everything ironed, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out that front piece first. This front exterior piece I'm going to top stitch along that curve that I just sewed, that I just pressed with the iron. I turned my stitch length back up because I'd had it shortened while I was sewing these, but for top stitching I always like a bigger stitch. I'm going to a 3.5, and I'm just going to follow that same curve and top stitch around this opening. Okay, I've got that top stitch. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the front and the back. So this is the front, that is your lining on the back. The way we're going to do this now is we're going to take this short edge of this lining pocket piece and we're going to bring it all the way up so that it's flush with this piece. So from the back, what you're going to do is you're going to take the bottom of that lining piece and you're going to pull it straight up to where it matches the top of the other pieces. I'm going to put a clip right here on this side. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, put those right sides together, matching them up at the top. Let's look at this from the front before we start sewing it, just so you can kind of understand what's going on. You will have some of it hanging down from the bottom. That's completely expected. Don't worry about that at all. So now that we have that clipped in place, we have to sew this and secure it together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew down. I'll pull this back a little and sew down the sides. On each side, I'll pull my exterior piece out of the way so I don't catch it, and sew down the sides of the pocket lining on both sides. That will complete this front part for the time being. So now I have a completed pocket here on my front. I will take this over the iron and just kind of flatten this so it's not giving me any problems once I add the foam to it. So just something you might want to know. You may want to press yours flat too. So this is the front. I'm going to set it aside, and now we're going to work on the back exterior. For the back, all I have done was press this. I did not top stitch it. We do not want to top stitch the back because what we want to do now is we want to pull out one of our zippers. Make sure you already have the zipper pull on. If you're nervous with this step, you can definitely add double-sided tape. What you're going to do is you're going to center that zipper behind that cutout. I'm going to take this top edge and I'm just going to match it to the other top edge of that exterior panel. I'm going to put a clip right there. Do the same thing to this other side. Clip it in place. And look at what you have. You will have this gorgeous little zipper here, this feature zipper that I love. I really sometimes think this should be the front because it is so cute. So you can choose if you want this to be the front and the back. What you will do now to attach this zipper is now you're going to top stitch that curve. That will secure that zipper to this exterior piece. So let's go ahead and do that. We have the pocket lining still down and floating. We're not fooling with it at all. We're just top stitching that zipper in place. When I top stitch, I'm doing 1/8 of an inch away, so that's all I'm going to be doing here to secure that zipper. If you feel like you're getting too close to this bottom, you can pull it up a little bit, but I find that it works perfect whenever I just match up those top edges. It's a beautiful fit. Back stitch, of course, when you start and stop. Now, if you were expecting me to not stop and ooh and ah over every step of this pattern, you're probably wrong because, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Love it. So now what we're going to do is the same thing we did on the front. I'm going to flip this over. I'm looking at my lining piece now, and I'm simply going to pull that lining up so that it is flush with the top. And I'll put a clip on both sides. You could put a clip in the middle if you wanted to, if that would kind of help you feel a little bit more secure there. And so now we will look over here and we'll see that that pocket is hanging down. That's completely normal. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew not only these 3 sides, but I'm going to go ahead and baste across the top just so there's no shifting on anything. So let's do those steps and get this pocket and this back piece fully finished. The zipper pocket on the back is completely finished. I'm going to set this piece aside with the front, and I'm going to go ahead and work on this interior zipper as well. I went ahead and have a zipper with a zipper pull attached. I am just going to flip this over so you can see how the lining looks. The zipper is going to go in the middle of that box. I want it centered so I have plenty of zipper tape on each side and plenty of zipper tape showing through my box. You can definitely use glue or tape or whatever you prefer here. I just prefer to do it organically, so that way while I'm sewing, if I see anything shifting, I can just maneuver it myself. Definitely do whatever feels comfortable and best for you. We are going to sew 1/8 of an inch around the folded edges of this box, and then we will come back to close up this pocket. Okay, I have the zipper attached. Just as a note, I didn't mention it, but your lining stays open at that point. Now what you do to close this is you simply flip it down to match up your raw edges on your lining piece. I'm going to add some clips there so I don't have any shifting. On this pocket, I'm going to sew down the sides, but I'm going to leave the bottom open for now. So let's go ahead and close up the sides of our zipper pocket on the lining. I'm going to trim down my lining pocket and the zipper tape. Pay no attention if my zipper tape is longer than yours. I never measure zipper tape for things like this. I just cut it. So mine may be longer than yours, but that doesn't mean yours is wrong. I'm also going to iron this little part of my pocket flat because it's still a little poofy too. So I like to have them nice and flat so they lay together at the end when everything's completed. I'm going to set aside this lining piece. I have everything ironed and it's ready to go, but we're not going to attach it just yet. We're instead going to work on finishing up that exterior. So I have my 2 exterior pieces. This is going to be considered my front. This is going to be considered my back. I'm going to pull out that base piece. Mine is going to be cut out of vinyl. I don't have anything on the back of it. Well, except probably some dog hair because I have dogs. So what I will do is I will take my front exterior piece and this base piece. This is the way it's going to look whenever we finish sewing it. So to get that look, what we'll do is we'll just flip this up, right sides together. I'm going to add a few clips right here at the bottom just to kind of keep everything organized. My vinyl is very slick and so it's just sliding around everywhere. So I'm afraid when I take it over the machine, if I don't have it clipped a little bit in place, it would just be moving around everywhere. We're going to sew this on with the seam allowance given the pattern. I'm going to go ahead and lift that pocket out of the way because I do not want to get it caught in the bottom of this part. Let's go ahead and sew along this edge, connecting these 2 pieces, backstitch when you start and stop. Now that I have it attached, I'm going to flip these apart and I'm going to top stitch. I have the front attached. Now I'm going to take that bottom piece and I'm going to do the same thing. This is the way I want it to look at the end. So then I'll just flip it down, right sides together, matching up those 2 bottom edges. Put some clips in place. Flip my pocket out of the way, sew again with the seam allowance given in the pattern, and top stitch. So now we have the exterior pieces attached to that base. I'm going to trim up my threads and then I'm going to pull out that piece of foam and baste everything in place. So here's my foam. My foam is not fusible. Even if it was, I would still baste this in place. I'm going to make sure that my pockets are both laying properly, laying flat. And then I'm going to set this down on the foam. I'm going to smooth everything out. I'm going to turn my stitch length up to about as high as it'll go. I'm going to go to about a 5. I find that whenever I turn that stitch length up, I have less chance of this bubbling or getting kind of odd when you're sewing it. But when I'm sewing it, I'm going to help my feed dogs to kind of keep up with the foam and all the layers by having my hand holding this flat and kind of helping it go through. I'm going to sew slow. I'm not going to speed through it so that my feed dogs can catch everything and help it maneuver along quickly. This is not a part I rush. I hate it whenever I'm doing something really nice and I rush through the foam part and it just looks really ugly. So go slow and let's baste all around these corners, including the cutouts. We're going to baste this foam onto that as well, and then we'll trim the foam away from all the edges. I have the body attached to the foam. I'm just going to trim up around all the edges, including inside the cutouts, and then we'll come back for our next steps. So I just went back and was looking at the pattern instructions, and actually the designer tells us that we're supposed to open the seams on these whenever we sew these bottom parts here. Open them and sew on both sides, both the exterior and the vinyl part, the base. So it's not a huge deal, but I did want to make that correction so that I'm following the pattern exactly. I did go back and do mine. So just so you know, open it both sides. There we go. Let's move on. Now what we're going to do, now that we have our exterior completed at this point, we are going to fold it right sides together. And let's add a few clips. We are going to sew down the sides of this bag, and then we'll even box the corners. Try to match up your seams if at all possible. They're on the bottom. They should be decently okay if you did an okay job with cutting and sewing with your seam allowances, and if you haven't made any mistakes like I obviously just did. Mine still match up. It doesn't affect that. And I guess if that's the only mistake I make while sewing this bag, I think she'll forgive me. It's not that big of a deal. Okay, now I'm going to sew up the sides with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Then we will come back and box the corners. So now we have our sides sewn. So if you wanted, you can make a little mark to where those centers are, just so you don't get confused when you're trying to box these corners. Come in from the middle, put your hand inside, match up that center point you just made with the center of the seam. Add a few clips to hold everything together. You can put your finger in here to make sure everything stays nice and smooth as well. We don't want to sew over like a bump or a wrinkle. Same thing here, go from inside to open everything up nicely. Then we are just going to sew across these edges right here with the seam allowance given the pattern, and that will make those beautiful boxed corners. Flatten everything down, sew that with that seam up so you can just watch how everything's going. And try your best to keep an accurate seam allowance here, because if you wobble, it'll show on whenever your bag is turned right side out. Definitely back stitch when you start and stop. Repeating those same steps for the other side. I'm going to trim that bulk down just a slight bit. I'm going to set this aside, and I'm immediately going to pull out that top band. That is the big piece with the Decaville Heavy on it. I'm going to take those two short edges and clip them together. We're going to sew across this edge with the seam allowance given in the pattern. You should not be sewing through your Decaville Heavy at that point. Now what we're going to do is we're going to open this seam up, butterfly the seam, and we're going to stitch on both sides of that seam to kind of anchor it down so that it'll be a smooth, easy lay whenever we're putting everything together. If you are concerned about weakening the seam since we are opening and butterflying it, the designer tells us we can put a piece of ribbon, a piece of interfacing, whatever you want to sew in place to help reinforce that seam. Okay, I have that seam sewn open on the front and the back. Now that we have the top band sewed together, what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently push this together to mark my center marks on that side, and then push those two marks and the seam together to make the quarter marks on the other side. Make sure I transfer over the center marks on the exteriors of this bag. I'm going to go ahead and flip it now. I'm turning the bag right sides out so we can install the band on the top. I have the center marks on this bag, and then I have the center marks also on the top band there. Okay, so remember, this is the front, this is the back. I'm going to take my top band. This will be the back of my band. I'm going to make sure that when I'm putting this on, that I'm putting it on with the band, the Decaville Heavy, more towards the top. I'm going to match up the seams. The first seam I'll match up is the back seam. Then I'll go to the front seam and then the quarter seams. I'm just going to add a few more clips along the top here so while I'm sewing things don't slip around, but you're just going to sew around the entire perimeter of this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. After we do that, then we will flip the top band up and the seam allowance up, and then we will top stitch. So let's start this now. We're just going to lift the bag, open up the bag, and put it in there and go in a complete circle, making sure I back stitch in the beginning and the end. Now that I have that attached, I'm just going to flip up the top band first. I want to do this gently so I don't, like the Decaville Heavy sometimes wants to come undone. I did use my heat press to attach it, but I'm just going to be easy with it so it doesn't unadhere itself. Okay, I'm going to look and make sure everything looks good. I'm specifically checking around the zipper. Yes, I'm good around the zipper. So now that I have it like this, I need to top stitch all along here. I'm going to top stitch on the top band. I'm going to have my seam allowance going up so I can catch it. Now, if I did it like this, I'm afraid that the top stitching on this side will just look horrible. I'm not risking it. I'm going to flip my entire bag inside out. I know it's another step, another little bit. If you're a great top stitcher, fine, go ahead and do it the other way. But me, I know better. I know mine would look probably really crooked, and I don't want to risk messing it up. So I'm flipping this entire thing inside out. If you have a cylinder arm, of course, this would not be an issue, but for me, I don't. I'm going to go ahead and flip this top band down, not because I need to, just to kind of get it out of the way a little bit so I can sew it a little bit better. Remember, this seam is going up, and we are going to top stitch on this blue here 1/8 of an inch away from that edge all the way around. You're going to fit it under your machine, push everything down so you can get a really good view. Use your fingers underneath to make sure that seam is staying consistently up, and just go slow. If you want, you can lengthen your stitch length, but I'm just going to take my time and go around this complete perimeter. So I'm going to set my exterior side. We're just going to wait on it for a little bit. I think I need to flip it the right sides out before I add the lining, but we'll do that a little bit later. I'm just going to push it to the side. We're going to start working on our recessed zipper. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take the short end of the zipper panel, and we're going to make a mark. The pattern tells us how far down to make that mark. Then we're simply going to fold this raw edge to that line. I've already done that on the other 3 sides, so we'll do it to all 4, but I've already done it to these 2 sides on this one and this one side here. I use glue for mine. You can use whatever you want. You can use double-sided tape, but I use this Beacon 3-in-1 glue. I do not put a lot. I make sure I test the glue on the vinyl to make sure it can handle it. Some vinyls, if they're very thin, it'll kind of even like almost melt it or show through, so I never want that. But once the glue dries, it's pretty permanent, and then I don't have to worry about it gumming up my needle and things like that. And plus, I just feel like this is a more economical way to do it. I don't have to buy a lot of glue. 1 bottle will last me years, and I don't have to worry about the paper I get stuck and all that. So this is an easier way for me. The glue usually takes about 5 minutes to dry, so I'm just going to leave that like that. The other ones are already dry, so we can even start working on them. The next thing I'll do is I'll pull out that zipper tape. What we're going to do is we're going to fold down the edges to this side that will be our closed side 90 degrees. If you get confused on how to do that, I'm going to show you right here. You just separate, and then you take one end, and what I do is I push the coils down while pushing the tape up. And so then I can get a perfect 90 degree curve there. I do add glue right here in that crease to close it up and to secure it, but you can easily stitch it. It's not a problem at all. So that is how I have these. I already have these glued. They are secure now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to separate this tape. We are going to keep this tape separated all during installation. I will not add my pull or the zipper tab until I'm at the end, until everything's done on this. Let's go ahead and take the clips off of this side. They are already ready to go. This piece is dry. The pattern tells us we're going to make a mark from the right side, and we're going to have those marks on the exterior, but we're going to keep them inside the seam allowance. This is going to help us to know where to place the zipper. Now I want you to know that this mark is not in the middle. So when we fold it, this would be the middle, but that's not where that mark's going to be. Because we are going to do this zipper panel a little bit differently, we don't want it exactly in the middle. We want to have our teeth to have a little bit of freedom and space in there. So I'm going to open this back up. I'm going to take one of my zipper pieces here. I am going to flip it and place it right sides down on that mark I made. I'm going to add a few clips to hold that in place. Then I'm going to pull that other side down to match up those folded edges. I'm going to reclip. And so let's look at what we have. We have the 2 pieces of vinyl sandwich with the zipper sandwich in the middle. The zipper has a little bit of space at the edge. The other ends are matching. The raw edges are all together here. On the other side, we can see the zipper teeth. This is how we're going to sew this zipper. We're going to use the seam allowance given in the pattern, and then we will trim our corner here just to get rid of some extra bulk, and then we'll flip it right sides out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim this curve up a little bit just to reduce some of that bulk. Then I'm going to take it and I'm going to flip it out and start matching up those sides. Now that I have this, what I can do is I can baste all the way around. So I can baste the raw edges, and then I can top stitch along the other sides. So sew all around this, and then we'll repeat those same steps for the other one. So here is the first side complete. Now I'm going to do the other side. Both of my panels are done. They look great. I'm going to set these aside, and now it's time to work on the lining, and then we'll put everything all together. So I pulled out my 2 lining pieces. The piece with the zipper pocket is considered our back panel. Since it's our back panel, we want to make sure, or at least I do, that the zipper is going to close to the left. So this is the way I'm going to add that zipper, recessed zipper piece. I'm going to match up the top raw edges, and I'm going to center it in place. For the other piece, which will be the front, we want to make sure that we have our recessed zipper mirrored. So we don't want to have it going the same way as this one, or we wouldn't be able to zip up the bag. So I always like to put them together to make sure I'm doing it the right way. If you're still confused, you can even put them right sides together to make sure that you do have everything put in the right way so that the zipper closes perfectly on top. Now that we have these both centered and matched up with the raw edges at the top, we're just going to base these 2 pieces in place. After we base those in place, you're going to see me go ahead and put these 2 lining pieces right sides together. I'll keep the zipper tails out of the way, and then I'm just going to sew down both of these sides, leaving the bottom completely open. I'm going to back stitch at the top and the bottom using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So let's do these steps, and then we'll get ready to put everything together and finish up our bag. Now let's take our exterior and let's go ahead and push it right sides out. And we're going to push this inside the interior. I'm going to match up the back of this exterior with the back, which is where the zipper pocket is, of the lining. You're going to match up all your seams so everything looks really nice. Clip all the way around, matching up the 2 top raw edges. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew around the perimeter of this bag with the seam allowance giving in the pattern, making sure I backstitch whenever I start and stop. So now I'm going to pull out that exterior, and then I'll push the lining inside. So now what we're going to do is we have this top band and we have this stabilizer in it. You should be able to fold it over to where that top band is. So I'm going to push my lining, and the pattern tells you about how far it should be sticking up. And you can use a ruler to measure. The rest will all go inside. The pattern designer makes sure to tell us that this is a part we want to take our time on. We don't want to rush this step. We want to even get out a ruler before we finish to make sure that everything is even and symmetrical around the entire perimeter of the bag, because if not, it's going to be noticed and it'll just not look like as neat and as professional a bag as you may want. So take your time, work all the way through it. So I have the top clipped down and I'm ready to top stitch it. Now typically I would flip this inside out again and top stitch from my exterior. But I'm getting kind of tired, guys. It's getting kind of late and I'm like, oh, do I feel like flipping it? So I'm going to risk it and I'm going to try to just go really slow and do a really nice top stitching from this side. We'll see how it works out. I may regret it later. I did go ahead and decide on my strap. I just did a piece of woven, the same as my exterior here, and I did a 4-way fold on it, but I didn't add interfacing. Instead, I added a piece of webbing on the back to kind of give it that extra support and stability. Added my swivel hook and my adjuster bar, so I have that done. Let's go ahead. We only have a few more steps to go, so let's go ahead and slowly stitch around the perimeter of the exterior. I'm going to lengthen my stitch length a little bit to try to get a better top stitch because we do have a couple layers we're going through. top stitching doesn't look bad at all. That's great. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, let me clip these threads that are just hanging loose here. And now what we're going to do is close up some of the holes in here. So we know the bottom of the lining is open and also the zipper pocket. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go through my zipper pocket. So open your zipper pocket and pull your lining up through it. So there is my lining. I'm going to now match up the bottom edge so I can stitch it closed. I'm going to use the correct seam allowance, the same seam allowance we've been using while sewing this entire pattern, and I'm going to stitch across this. Then after this I will box the corners. So now I have that bottom stitched. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull apart the corners. This is a little tricky because I can't, if you know from my other videos, I always like to go from the inside. I can't do that with this. But where it is the lining, it's not as big of a deal as for the exterior. So I will just pinch those closed, put a clip there, and then I'm going to sew across. You're just pulling, matching up those seams. I'm going to make sure the seams are going in opposite directions so that I can get a little bit better of a stitch there without any too much bunching. So let's sew across both those corners with the seam allowance given the pattern. Then I'm going to push this back through that zipper pocket, and then I'll close up the zipper pocket. Oh. I'm going to trim those down just a little bit. Now I'm going to push that back through my pocket. Then I'm going to pull my pocket out and close it. We'll just, sorry that let me turn it over so that zipper pull doesn't keep banging on everything. Okay, so I'll push in the zipper pocket just like we typically do when we close a zipper pocket. Push in those sides and then pull it. And then I'm just going to sew across this seam, those folded edges, about 1/8 of an inch away. Okay, have that pocket closed up, push it down in there, smooth everything out. Push my lining back in, close up that pocket, straighten everything up. We want everything nice and smooth. Okay, now I need to add the zipper pull onto this zipper. The way I like to do it is I like to maybe put like a little clip there to kind of the way I want it to match up, so that I know exactly if like my zipper needs trimmed or if everything's matching perfectly and things like that. Mine looks great, great, great. So my zipper does not need trimmed, and it really shouldn't, but sometimes when we sew, things get a little wonky. We know how that goes. I'm going to put my zipper on. Beautiful, beautiful. The recessed zipper looks great. I'm not going to trim that. I'm going to leave that as is. I have my zipper tape a little bit longer than the pattern called for, but I'm okay with that. I am just going to now take a small scrap of vinyl. I didn't even measure this. I just cut it. And I'm just going to fold it in half to finish that edge there. I'm not particular with this part. If you wanted to, you could be fancy and add some rivets here or have, you know, a really nice folded edge. I never worry about it. I just kind of finish it. So that's what I'll do. I just fold it over. It'll have raw edges there. I'm just going to sew 1/8 of an inch away from the raw edges just to secure that zipper tab. I'll trim it up once I'm done. I'm going to stick that inside. And the last thing we need to do is the grommets. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to make my measurements on both sides. I'll use the pattern instructions for that. Now I'm going to kind of crop in close so I can kind of explain everything to you and hope you guys can see everything properly. Here is my rivet press. I get this from Cam Snaps. She's a great lady. I love working with her. Definitely recommend. First thing we need to know is we need to put our dies in there. We are going to use a flat. This is our cutting die kind of, so that's the flat place to where the blade can go to. It's not doing anything, it's just kind of serving as that surface. The next thing I need to do is I need to get my cutter. This is the cutter. The spring is what pushes everything out, but that sharp round circle is what's actually going to be doing the cutting. That's going to go on top, and I'm going to have to twist it in there. This is just to cut the holes on the bag. This pattern tells me that I'm going to measure from the top down right here in this middle seam. So I made a little dot there. All I do, and I'm going to open up this bag so I can get in there really nicely, is I'm going to put my bag right there to where that hole is going to, where that dot that I made, that mark, is going to fit perfectly when I push this down. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do, you have to use kind of a little bit of force to do this, and my desk isn't 100% like secure, so I'm a little nervous that it might cause some problems. So I go down slow until I get to that dot, until my press here, this cutter, is completely encircled in that dot. Sorry I had to get in front of the camera, but I have to use my body for the press to kind of push it out. So you can see it cut that hole perfectly. I'm going to get it out. I'm going to make sure it went through both sides. I can tell it didn't. It usually does go through all sides, but where I'm trying to do this on camera and where I usually do it on the floor, I have better body support. So I'm going to walk in front of the camera again. There we go. So you can see I got a perfect hole there. I'm going to do that same thing on the other side, but I'm not going to do it on camera. I'm just going to do one. Actually, let me do the other one on camera. Maybe that one I'll get it a little bit better. Let me try it from this angle and see if it does a little better. If I get a little bit better of a press and a little bit better view for you guys, I'm going to center that dot on that cutting press. Once I have it where I want it to be, that's when I put my weight on it to just put it down. So now we got that perfect hole. What we're going to do is we're going to change the dies. I'm going to take out the cutters and the cutting base, and we're going to put in the two dies that are actually going to be used to press the grommet into place. Cam Snaps will help you. If you say you want to learn how to install grommets, she will help you. She's really good. She's very knowledgeable, so she's really easy to work with. So I put the base down in the bottom, and then I screwed the other piece on top. To install the grommets, I have two pieces. One is going to look like a hat. You can see it's flared at the top. The other one is going to be flat. What's going to happen is you're going to put the bag in between these two pieces, and this flared part is going to smash down, kind of mushroom out, and that's what's going to hold it in place. Personally, I like to put, and I don't know if there's a good rule, but I just push that in. It just pushes right in and fits in there. This other piece won't stay when you push it in, so what I do is I go ahead and get, like, I push that grommet to where it's coming through the other side, and then I push it down onto the base, and then I just lay that other piece on top. I make sure that metal is coming through so that I can see it there, and then I just use the press to put the weight on it. I'm going to have to walk in front of the camera again so I can get on the other side, and then the press will flare everything out. So you can see it just does it perfectly on its own. Perfect grommet. Super easy. It's a lot easier than what it's looking like on camera because it's just my angle. So I promise you it's not a hard thing. Let's go ahead and do that other side so I can finish up this bag. Again, I'm just going to push that through. I'm going to come and place it down on my press. I'm going to try to do it from this angle and see if I can get it to smash. I might have to go back and smash that one a little bit more, but I'll do it off camera. So here is my completed chartreuse bag. You guys have definitely went on an adventure with me on this one. It took me a little bit longer because I did want to slow things down. I've had several people ask me to go just a little bit slower. Let me know in the comments if you think this is the right length of a tutorial, or do you like them slower? Do you feel like that gives you an added value, or would you prefer me to do them a little bit quicker? Let me know so you know. But let's go over it. We have this beautiful feature fabric here. We have a slip pocket in front. We have the zipper in the back. I love these pulls. They're gorgeous. The pulls are from Natural Nerd. I love her stuff. We have a recessed zipper inside. The zipper pocket inside. Close that up. I made the crossbody strap and I left it over on my other counter so I can't show it to you. As you can see, it's a gorgeous bag. It's not a super large bag, but I would call it a medium size. Perfect though for what I'd want to carry. I don't like to carry huge bags. I feel like it looks very classy, very unique, and you can see all the steps were super simple. Very easy. Thank you so much for spending the day with me. Thank you for taking the time to watch the tutorial. I really appreciate it. I have everything that I use in this video linked in the description. If you have any questions or concerns or anything you want me to do a video on, just let me know. Thanks so much. Have a great day, and I hope you'll sew up one of these and post it in the Facebook group. This is her first design and she's very excited, and we're all super proud of her.